All right, everybody. If you can all please take a seat, we're going to get started. Thank you very much for joining us. We did promise in the materials that this would be a day-long graduate school experience, and it's already started well because you're not paying attention to me. But welcome back to school, and for those of you who are still in school, well, this is a different kind of class. As you can tell, it's not your typical space, and we chose that on purpose, and I'll explain more why. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Hanson Hosein. I'm the director of the Communication Leadership Master's Program. And this is pretty typical for us to be able to take thorny, big questions around communication, technology, and how we convene and connect, and make sure that we share it with the public as much as possible, because we see this very much as a public conversation. And so for all of you to join us here today to be part of that conversation, I thank you. We have work to do, both societally and just for today, that I think is going to be very impactful when we're all done. And so we were very clear in all our promotional materials about what we think we'd like to do today and how we're framing it. But obviously, you're all here for different reasons. Some of you really just want to understand where we are right now with artificial intelligence and what it means for you in terms of what you do, both in terms of your work or if you're in school, what it might mean for your career. Some of you are worried about what this might mean for where this is headed and whether there's anything we can do about this. And some of you just want to meet really cool people and take some great selfies. I think you'll be able to do that a little later. There's a deck out there where you can actually get a good view of the stage. So you're more than welcome to do that. Molly and I have looked at the guest list a number of times, and it's just a remarkable cross-section of people in terms of what you bring to the table as well. So you bring your expertise. And that's very much how we see our graduate program, that there are no prerequisites to coming into what we do at Communication Leadership. We're all trying to figure this out as it's happening in real time. And so we take a very open view in terms of who's the expert, the sage on the stage versus the sage in the audience. We definitely want to leverage that today. So I'm here for a very specific reason, and I don't know if you saw as you were coming in, there were some images on these larger screens of pictures of the northern lights, which is a phenomenon that happens especially in the Arctic, which are based on solar winds. And I took those images a few weeks ago. I decided that I wanted to go do something different, so I got permission from my family to take a 48-hour trip to Fairbanks, Alaska, as opposed to going to Hawaii. I don't know what the hell that was about. Because I just wanted to see things differently. And I managed to get these remarkable pictures and have this quasi-spiritual experience of seeing and capturing the northern lights. And the reason why I wanted to share those images with you and start with this as kind of a metaphor for today is that it speaks to one of my favorite quotes from one of my favorite books right now, which is by Yuval Harari, who wrote most recently a book called 21 Lessons for the 21st Century. And I just want to share you a paraphrasing of that because it gets to what we're doing here today and why this is so important. And this is the quote, and it's near the end of the book. He also wrote the two very well-known books, Homo Sapiens and Homo Deus, and I recommend all of them. It's really quite phenomenal. So the quote is, power is all about changing reality. So if you have power, you actually have the power to change things around you as opposed to accepting them, rather than seeing it for what it is. But if you really want the truth, you need to escape the black hole of power and allow yourself to waste a lot of time watering here and there on the periphery. And I just want to just unpack that a little bit because it's basically saying if you want to understand what's going, especially now when things are moving so fast, we're anxious about what this all means, you cannot insert yourself directly into all of it because you won't be able to see the forest from the trees. And that's how I saw myself being up in Alaska and be able to sort of remove myself a little bit to think and see differently. And in many ways for our students who go to graduate school, it's the same idea. In fact, I tell our students every year when they come in, this is your chance to actually take some risks, waste a little bit of time, think differently, and not always try to align everything you do with getting a job or some skill you think somebody's going to reward you for from a credibility point of view. Because things are changing so fast, you owe it to yourselves and to us to actually see and think differently by wasting a little time. Now, I'm not telling you you're going to be wasting time here today, but I want that same spirit to infuse you in terms of how you see what we're trying to do. We're removing ourselves a little bit from your day-to-day lives. You've sort of said, I'm not going to go to work today. I'm not going to be with my family. I'm going to hang out here at the stadium with these people who I don't know So you remove yourself from your comfort zone and from your power to see and think differently. And I can't think of a more important thing that you could all do right now than to see it that way. So even as I say this, there is this sense that there's an inevitability around technological change. And even in the last couple of years, we felt a bit of a backlash. In fact, some people are calling it a tech lash. That all these technologies that we've so willingly and almost uncritically adopted are now, we're all saying, well, wait a minute. And yet, at the same time, we're about to have the next wave of that as we see artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things. All these new technologies are going to not just invade our screens anymore that we carry with us all the time, but every inch of our lives. And there's a sense of inevitability around that narrative. And in fact, even today, just across the water over there, there's a 3-day conference going on in Bellevue on artificial intelligence. And it's built, and you're in the right place, trust me. But it's billed as a conference designed by developers, so the people who are creating these technologies for developers. And of course, it's the usual suspects in terms of companies and people who would be talking about this. But it's all about the what and the how with regards to these technologies. And as I look through it, there's not one why or if. And that is something, we are going to get to the what and the how here today, because we have that expertise. But the most important question for us right now is really the why. We have to make sure at this particular moment that we're making the right decisions about these technologies and its impact on us. And that's something that we're going to very much dig into today. And so the challenge fundamentally is that all of these tools and these technologies have come at us quickly. We've almost gotten an upgrade in terms of our brain and being able to think and see and do differently. But as somebody we've engaged with in the past few years has said, who's also a poet, he says, while we've upgraded our heads, we haven't upgraded our hearts. And so somewhere along the line, we have to think about how do we catch up with everything that these technologies have empowered us. And that's something that we're working on right now in the program. I'm thinking that we need to put out a very firm declaration around where we stand as humans about this. And so we've been working on the draft declaration, and it's quite possible that based on what comes out of here today, we may actually continue to add to it. It's a working document. It's very much like the Declaration of Independence in Philadelphia a few hundred years ago. We could actually you could be the original signatories to the first Declaration of Communication Leadership. So I just wanted to share with you the draft preamble to this declaration, because it gives you a bit of a sense of what we're trying to accomplish and why this is so important. And it's not very long. And it's very new. In fact, we just finalized some of the language a couple days ago. So it's a declaration of communication leadership. Since humans learned to communicate, we have told ourselves and each other stories to sort through the chaos of the natural world, to connect and to create together. Now, if you think about that, if you think about the stories that we've told ourselves, from religious stories to national stories to even sports stories, that's the kind of thing that sort of signals to other people, oh, I can connect to that person because we have a common signal, a common code. We can do things together. We're not naturally able to sort of collaborate at a scale without those stories. And by having those stories, we've created empires and nations and economic systems. And even here in this center, this is the Tai Club, there's a sign there, at Husky Stadium at the University of Washington. These are all fundamentally stories we tell ourselves to give ourselves a sense of identity. People who are Huskies, who go to this university, feel very passionately about being identified with this particular institution or a particular sports team. When you're on your break and you look outside of the field, you're going to see a whole bunch of sayings and exhortations and logos. Those are all stories that tie us to our identity, that give us a greater sense of ourselves. And you think about 200 years ago, none of this stuff was here. This was all just natural habitat. There was no such thing as the University of Washington. There was no such thing, barely something as Seattle. And so this is just a story that has helped give us a sense of place and a chance to collaborate. This is all about collaboration through story. So it's really important to understand that that's how fundamental this is to us. And that's about the change. So today we struggle to make sense of the increasingly complex information available to us. Our truths conflict with others' views. There's a breakdown in our ability to share common stories, which it makes it harder for us to make crucial choices around our futures. And as you've seen, there has been a breakdown in collaboration because we've all of a sudden developed our own truths because there's now so many stories conflicting with each other. Our power, and it gets worse, so yeah, great story here. Our power to make collective decisions will further erode in the near future as machines leverage the data of our lives to anticipate our needs. While this may ease our burden, it could ultimately push us to question our relevance. So this gets to the AI thing, that even as we've been talking so much about stories and identity, and you think about all the sort of polarizing conversations we're having in this country now around gender and around race and around politics, where there's a certain grouping around those particular ideas. If you think about what AI and data and all this very granular information these companies are collecting about us, at some point we may categorize ourselves differently because we're seen differently. All of a sudden we're a tribe or a group of one because our data is so specific to us, but the machines are so smart that we can be distinguished and discriminated against accordingly. And so the groupings will change because of that, and our sense of place in the universe and the stories we tell ourselves may change as well. So, this gets to you. There is the need for leadership now in this particular moment because all of the communication power that exists. A communication leader supports humans through the journey of being human. Today, we are very much the same as our human ancestors, but in a different environment with different tools. A communication leader understands how human nature is adapting to technology and works to align technology with human nature without exploiting people. Every time we think about online communities, we need to think about offline communities. Every time we think about digital communication, we need to think about interpersonal communication. So I wanted you to hear this and just think about it as we go through the day, because you're going to be getting a lot of expertise, a lot of information. You'll have a lot of opportunities to talk to each other critically about some of these ideas. But we are in this unique moment where we still have an opportunity to influence and shape where we're going with this, and it's absolutely crucial that we do so. And the journey that we're taking today is very much something that we've sort of prototyped over the last year in our graduate program. That even to be able to do this, first of all, we have to establish a baseline understanding of what is at stake. What is artificial intelligence? How is this technology going to work? And what is available to us now? So the first few speakers you'll hear from will be able to share that with you and just give us all that general understanding of where we're heading. Then we're going to take a step back and say, okay, that's where the technology is. What matters most to us, whether we're a community, a company, or an organization? What are our values and what is our culture that allows us to make the smart decisions around this? And what do we have to be careful with in terms of vulnerable communities around that? And so once we can start thinking about, well, here's the solution, here's who we are, do the two align? Then we move to the third part of the day in terms of, okay, then how do we connect it to, and how do we communicate that these new solutions are trusted, they're healthy for our organizations, for our stakeholders, and here's how we tell the story about it. That is the flow for the day. It's this idea of literacy, listening, and then linking that I think will apply not just to AI, but any emergent technology so that we can comfortably, safely, and credibly bring this into our world. And of course, we're surrounded by technology. I'm always reticent to attend conferences or even host conferences because I know we're always competing with the screens that we all have. And I have always taken a very organic view. You are, of course, welcome to use your technology as you see fit throughout the day. Ideally, because of how we hope to keep you engaged with really fast pacing and great information, I would love it if there's a chance, if you want to look at your email or your social feeds and make a phone call, if you could sort of move. I think we've created a couple spaces for that to happen. Molly, can you remind me which direction they should head in? Over there, yeah. So if you, anytime, even in the middle of like a really awesome speaker, just if you got to do something, just go do it. If you're bored, by all means, stay at your table and look at it. But I'm hoping that you won't be, because the more you engage with this stuff, the more you'll understand, and the more that we can do together. So that's just my one bit of vegetables to the dessert that we're serving it today. So with that, this is really meant to be edifying. It's supposed to be inspiring to you. It's supposed to enlighten you, and hopefully you'll also learn something. And so what we've done is created this really unique learning experience. And my colleague Molly Schachter and I have been working on this, and Molly is going to be leading as head of community and partnerships the learning opportunities that we're going to have throughout the day. And I'd like to introduce you to Molly and have her explain how some of that's going to work, and then we'll start moving on to the program. So Molly Schachter.
Great, thank you, Hanson. Hi, everybody. How's everybody doing today? Yeah, good. Are you excited about what you're about to experience? Good. Real quick, who has open seats at their table? Can you raise your hand? So if you just walked in and you're looking for a seat, take a look at, there's a lot of open seats. There's also extra chairs on either end, so you can pull those in. So as Hanson said, I'm Molly. I'm the head of our community and our partnership. So I think a lot about the experience of the people that we collaborate with. So whether that's students or our partner organizations or members of the general public who've chosen to engage with us. And I know there's a lot of you here today, and this is your first time. So welcome to our community. We are friendly, we're welcoming, we're going to reach out and make you feel included. So thank you so much for being here today. A couple of housekeeping things real quick. Restrooms on either side of the venue. We're going to have lunch at noon. There's going to be 2 buffets. There'll be coffee back there all day long. As Hanson said, feel free to break away, take care of yourself, check your devices, whatever you need to do to feel fully engaged as you're here. There's notebooks at your table and some pens. Those are for you to take notes with, and when we get to the activities, to jot down ideas. And in terms of the, let's see, where's the clicker here? There we go. The first thing that I want to kick off with is taking a look at the word cloud. So when we had you register, we asked you to come up with one word that you thought of when you thought about AI. And so you can see here, you can see words like robots, scary, potential, ethics, and obviously the most popular one is future, which I find fascinating because what you're going to hear today is that AI is actually not in the future. AI is here right now. So we'll do this activity again at the end of the day, and I'll be curious to see how this has changed. So speaking of the activity, we're going to break up in 3 different times throughout the day. So as Hanson said, we have a literacy portion, a listening portion, and a linking portion. So after the literacy portion, each table has a table captain that has somewhat of an idea of what we'll do. So you'll hear from 2 people, and then you'll have a chance to actually digest that information and put it within context. So our goal for you today is that when you walk out that door, you will understand what AI is, you'll understand how it impacts people, and you'll understand why it's really difficult to make decisions. And you'll be able to do all of this within context. So you'll be able to walk out that door and explain that and say, for example, which I think is the key to seeing if you really understand something, if you can say, for example. So with that, I would like to now introduce one of our key partners at We Communications. We has been our partner for this event that's been more than a year in the making. Matt Ashworth and I have known each other for a couple of years, and about a year ago we came together and said, let's do some sort of learning educational experience. And through a series of conversations, we realized that this idea of decision-making in emergent technology is something that communicators are just primed to do. So after a series of conversations, we landed on this focus of AI, and Matt has been really key in helping us come up with the conception of this. There's a lot of his We colleagues here today. And with that, I'm going to welcome Matt up to the stage.
Thank you, Molly. Hello, everyone. Great to see everybody here. See a lot of familiar faces and a lot of new faces. I'm really excited to engage in conversation with everybody today around this topic. I wanted to take a few moments just to tell you a little bit about We Communications, who we are, how we're thinking about AI, and ultimately why we partnered with Comm Lead to explore this topic and bring you this event. So We Communications, we're one of the largest independent communication agencies in the world with about 900 employees across the globe. Our headquarters are right here in the Seattle market in Bellevue. And we have been proud to be the agency of record for Microsoft for more than 3 decades now. Our work really spans 3 primary sectors: consumer, healthcare, and tech, but our legacy is really in technology. And as you can imagine, with sort of technology in our DNA, that has served us well over recent years because we really believe that today everybody has a technology story to tell. When I started my career, technology was a sector. And if you worked in technology and you supported tech clients, you told tech stories to tech media. But today, as you're well aware, technology is infusing every industry, and we really believe everyone has a technology story to tell. Examples of that all around us. Just recently, Walgreens, not somebody you might think of as a tech giant, partnered with Microsoft and launched some digital health corners in their stores to help patients better manage their chronic pain medication and just better manage their health in general. We are helping McDonald's tell their technology story, and specifically how they're using technology to improve their customer experience, both with the technology in the restaurant for customers and employees, with their mobile app, and for delivery. And then I think you can look to the auto industry in general, where 10 years ago, you know, the conversation around auto was around performance and horsepower. Now, the entire conversation is really driven by technology. So as you can imagine, as a company with technology in our DNA, we try to keep a really close eye on the emerging trends, and we really believe that AI is the next big fundamental shift that's happening in our world. And for those of you that are as old as me and can remember what our lives were like, or what our jobs were like before the internet and after the internet, if we sort of imagine that AI has the possibility for that same impact, it really behooves us to deeply understand this topic. Because I think we're not too far away from the place where we'll be able to say everyone has an AI story to tell. So one of the things we did last year is we said we need to kind of figure out what is the story around AI in our own industry for public relations and communications. So we did a big secondary research project, read research studies, talked to influencers, and 3 main themes emerged. The first one is where AI is going to impact our lives and our industries first, is with automation and predictive analytics. So automation of process-heavy tasks, like building coverage reports, creating media lists, and predictive analytics, giving us information that can help us anticipate how media or our audiences might react to a story that we want to tell. The second one is that it seems to me PR trails our peers in marketing and journalism when it comes to adopting the AI technology that is available today. And the third one is that there are a lot of ethical concerns that we need to be conscious of as we start adopting this technology, both for our own business and in choosing the clients that we support to tell their AI story. Unpack those a little bit. So one of the examples of automation that I feel like we hear about, another one every week, is chatbots, and I know you're going to hear a little bit more about chatbots later today. One that caught my eye recently is Victoria Beckham, so the former Spice Girl, fashion mogul. She launched a chatbot, and it was through Facebook Messenger, and it was basically her trying to remove the barrier between her and her fans, and they could chat with this Victoria Beckham-like chatbot. All right? If I think about how that might apply in our industry, we're probably not that far away from a MediaWhiz chatbot, where I can go to the chatbot and say, you know what, I've got a great story about how technology is helping patients with ALS lead better lives. Tell me, who are the 3 to 5 reporters that are most likely to be interested in that story? However, as I think you've all seen enough chatbot fails, we're not quite there yet. The Beckham chatbot eventually got around to saying that she was considering divorcing David, but she really liked his money. So automation, I think, is one place we'll see, but we're not quite there yet in our industry. And then when it comes to predictive analytics, there is a group of researchers at MIT who recently built a crisis management platform based on AI. And the tool can predict the length of a crisis. It can predict the rumors that are likely to emerge and which rumors are likely to be disproven. And so as I think about that as a communications professional, and we extrapolate that out further, we're probably not too far away from a tool like that being able to tell me, okay, are my competitors likely to weigh in the story surrounding this crisis? If so, what are they likely to say? Or what are the day 2, day 3, day 4 stories that journalists are going to be most interested in, so that I can anticipate that and control the narrative? So PR trails its peers, as I mentioned, marketing and journalism. The AP is already using AI tools to write content, which, as a writer is a little bit scary. But the way they're talking about it is they're using AI to do really factual, hard news, inverted pyramid style content, so that it frees up their journalists to do more nuanced reporting, more field reporting. So, one of the examples is an earthquake story, and the tool, following an earthquake, wrote the story. They had a journalist write it. The editor couldn't tell the difference between the two. And then the other example, I think, that's happening in the media industry, which again is a little nerve-wracking as a PR person, is outlets are starting to use AI to A/B test headlines, Mashable in particular. And I can tell you there's nothing worse as a PR professional than sending a note to your client saying, we landed the story, it's got the perfect headline, here it is. 5 hours later, they get out of a meeting, they click on the link, and it's got a different headline. But that's the world that we live in and that what we're going to have to be ready to adapt to. And then finally, ethics. I think with any technology comes some inherent fear, but the sort of sentient AI robots are coming to steal our jobs is largely inflated. The real thing we need to be conscious of is making sure that we don't pass human bias onto the AI tools that we use. And so it's going to be important for us as we adopt these tools to understand the technology so that we make good choices in what we buy. And I think last night at dinner, Hanson, you told me that there is not an ethics requirement in the computer science program at University of Washington yet.
That's right, but there is an ethics requirement in our
And you're, okay. Well, can you commit to this group right now that you'll get it done for the undergraduate too?
Well, yeah.
Can you make that happen?
I have no influence on undergraduate, but what I have to do is make sure computer science gets an ethics requirement at some point.
Right. So as communicators, it's not enough just to understand how AI is going to impact our industry, because we are walking forward through this transition side by side with our clients, and we need to understand how AI is going to impact their industries as well. And we're very fortunate to have a number of clients that we're supporting right now. You're going to hear from two folks from Microsoft today. Yes, I'm drinking the Kool-Aid because they are our clients, but clearly a leader in this space. And I just love the very sort of measured and authentic way they're talking about AI. It's not the stuff of science fiction. What it's going to look like is gradual improvements to all the places that you interact with technology already today. Wave Computing, they make machine learning chipsets. And their whole premise is around AI for all. So basically, they are saying we don't want just the biggest companies with large development resources to be able to deploy an AI solution to benefit their business and their customers. Let's make it available to everyone. And then finally, our newest client that we're supporting to tell their AI story, Capital One, kind of brings me around full circle. You probably wouldn't think of the what's in your wallet guys as being a tech leader. But they are deploying machine learning across every facet of their business. And the first thing we did for them was during the Amazon AWS conference, set up some tools to monitor the conversations and tell them what were the hot topics around AI and machine learning, because their developers wanted to go to Reddit, go to GitHub, and just engage in those conversations, which I thought was beautiful, because that tells me this is not a consumer brand jumping on a trend, trying to get headlines. This is a company reinventing itself around technology. So it's not enough even for us to understand how AI is going to impact the communication industry and how it's going to impact our clients, because there are just bigger, broader questions that need to be answered, and that's really what brings us to today and why we engage in this partnership with the Comm Lead program, to really talk about how is AI going to fundamentally change the way we live? How is it going to change the way we make decisions? And how is it going to change the way we communicate with people? So I'm glad you're all here. This is meant to be the start of a conversation that hopefully will spill over into the coming weeks and months ahead. So if you want to do that, there's how you get at me, and enjoy the program.
Thank you, Matt.
You bet.
And thank you for all your support. And a number of our graduates work at We as well, so it's definitely a great partnership. You've heard Microsoft mentioned a few times, and I just want to make it very clear that as we were thinking about, and we were very conscientious about programming the narrative flow for today, and we didn't want any one particular company to be overrepresented or to make this look like any kind of sales job. But as we examined the landscape, and actually we even created a brain trust of networked, really thoughtful leaders about who should be speaking about this. And everybody kept on saying Microsoft, Microsoft, Microsoft. So you are going to hear from 2 Microsoft people today. It's not intentional, but it's just their expertise is really just useful in general to everything we're trying to do today. And that brings us to our first speaker, who is from Microsoft, Noelle LaCharite. She's one of the most dynamic communicators I've ever seen around technology. Ever, and she's impressive. She's spoken at our events before. We gave a master class on the Internet of Things and VR a few years ago with Facebook, and Noelle at the time was working at Amazon, and just blew us away in terms of how she could help us make sense of what seems to be very complicated, but actually does impact us, and we can actually do something about this. So I'm very pleased that Noelle has agreed to kick this off with us. The intention with Noelle is to give you a baseline understanding of what AI is from a developer's point of view, about how this technology is being developed and how you can understand it. And most fundamentally, for the purposes of what we're doing here today, what is available right now to be used. We're almost at the WordPress GoDaddy AI point, where there's a lot of off-the-shelf technology that people who barely have an expertise in technology can actually put this out there now. And you need to understand that, and Noelle's going to give us that perspective. So with that, please welcome Noelle LaCharite from Microsoft. You're doing this. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Hello. All right, we're going to see if I can finagle a mouse. We'll see what happens. It's not meant to be. It's not meant to be. Hi, everybody. I'm Noelle LaCharite. I am so grateful to have been asked to speak to you guys today. I do have quite a bit of companies. I really don't feel like I'm like any one company's person. I do feel like I've kind of traversed over the last 20 years of my career. I started off at IBM. Technically, I started off at Boeing. Was given that classic golden, everyone was high-fiving me back then. Hey, oh, you're set for life. You're going to have a job. Like, you could just retire there. Yeah, like 18 months later, I was like, so I guess I'm going to find another job. And so I went to work for IBM, and great years. I was in middleware. I wrote books. I was just super excited about that technology. Totally at that time, hitched my wagon and said, this is it. And at that time, we were saying, this client-server thing is taking over, just like similar messaging we have now. And I was like, this is awesome. And so I spent like 5 years educating people. And then I went to Red Hat, open source, apparently like the light to the dark that I was apparently living in. And so I went to the light, and I was like, this is awesome. Spent another 5 years in the mobile craze, again, thinking like, this is it. This is the thing that's going to change the world. And little did I know, a very small product at the time, on the heels of utter failure at Amazon. I was working at AWS. I was a training lead. I was just slowly old training lead. I had a couple people that worked for me, and Alexa was born. And I don't know how many of you know, but Alexa was born right after Fire Phone. So literally when they were like, hey, anyone want to join Alexa? Like, people like stepped back, right? And I was the one who was like, what's going on? I don't understand. And they're like, Noelle, awesome. So I ended up joining the Alexa organization at just an amazing time. I created some of the most early skills. Today, they're even some of the most popular. The only skill that has a single word, mindfulness, the mindfulness skill, I wrote that. Daily affirmation. And the reason I tell you these things, I wrote daily kindness, Christmas kindness, because at that time, some of you could probably relate, where I was like, I used to wear this shirt that said, I heart AI. And I kid you not, people would stop me in the airport and be like, you know that's going to kill us all, right? Like, I'm like, I don't think so. But then I would tell them, don't worry, I have taught it to be mindful and kind. So even if it's bad, we will totally enjoy it. So I have had quite the journey. I spent 4 years at Amazon. I loved every minute of being part of the Alexa thing, because when I started, no one knew what it was. And now I can talk to people and they know what it is, and I think that's cool. But I joined Microsoft because voice, though fantastic, was just a small sliver of what's possible with AI, right? Everyone now who has Alexa in their home or a Google Home device in their home, they are using AI every day. And what they don't realize, so in building skills, I will tell you, my family, and yeah, that's my family right there. We own a farm in Granite Falls. I have a gaggle of people. My dad's there. We all live happily together. But when I showed my skills to my dad, he's like, oh my gosh, this is amazing, super smart. He did not realize that every single decision that he asked for and it replied with, I hand-coded 700 lines of like, if you say this, say this. And it turned out I was pretty good at guessing what people would say, especially around affirmations and mindfulness, but it was magic to the people that used it. No one knew that I hand wrote it. So AI, especially today, it's very important to realize that AI is very much built on the backs of devs, sitting there going, oh my goodness, what are they going to say, right? Or listening. For 2 years, I was on the machine learning organization listening to what people would say to Alexa and fail, and we'd go and write it in. Literally, that's how the magic of Alexa was born. Now, today we do use AI, and I do want to tell you kind of why AI is a definition you should know. It is kind of like a very generic term now. It's kind of bloated, similar to like web services or architecture. But today, AI came from, and Matt actually talked about this, so I wanted to just briefly mention it, this concept of a Turing test. There was a guy, his name was Turing, you should look him up. If you haven't written anything down, that's a good one to start with. But this guy, he basically was like, hey, how could we create a machine that could help? And the first thing people said was, well, it can never do the job that I do. It can never be as good as I could be. So that literally became the bar. The bar is, let me write some software that could do just as good as you so that someone looking at it could not tell the difference. Similarly, right to that story. And the benefit to that was, oh my goodness, I don't have to do that anymore, right? If a machine could do it, I can now focus on other things. I'll give you a very specific example of why this works. I go into companies all the time and educate them about AI, similar to what we're doing right now. And the conversation that I have with them is always around like, what can AI do for me, right? What's in it for me? We're always, if we're not saying it out loud, we're certainly kind of thinking it. And with AI, there's not a single HR organization, legal organization, receptionist who does not answer the same questions over and over and over again. So when I walk in and I say, in about 10 minutes, I could build a little piece of software that could answer all of those questions for you so you could focus on the stuff you went to school for, that you're passionate about. Like tears of joy I've seen, right? Like the little brim of like, oh my, are you serious? This is amazing. I've never had someone come to me and be like, I really wish you hadn't taken that part of my job away. And that's really why I joined Microsoft, is that we're focused on that type of ingenuity. The type of ingenuity that uses software in order to make people blissfully happy in their jobs, because there's plenty of many jobs that we actually don't want to do anymore, that we've evolved as a human brain beyond having to do. And so I focus on that. My job today, hopefully, in the next few minutes, is just demonstrate to you some of the goodness. I always like to start with a video, though, if you don't mind. So I'm going to start with a video really quick. It's only a minute, so hang in there.
Today, right now, you have more power at your fingertips than entire generations that came before you. Think about that. That's what technology really is. It's possibility, it's adaptability, it's capability. But in the end, it's only a tool. What's a hammer without a person who swings it? It's not about what technology can do, it's about what you can do with it. You're the voice, and it's the microphone. When you're the artist, it's the paintbrush. We are living in the future we always dreamed of. We have mixed reality that changes how we see the world, and AI empowering us to change the world we see. You have more power at your fingertips than entire generations that came before you. So here's the question. What will you do with it?
I'm so glad you guys that's my favorite part, right? When the kid's like, mind blown. Like, because we all feel that way at some point in this journey of learning about this tech. You're like, oh my gosh. But I love this video, one, because it came out the day I started at Microsoft. And I was like, it's meant to be. Because it totally is why I'm doing what I do and why I'm intensely passionate about this technology. But I also like to just ask you to humor me as I present you with something that I have shared my entire career with the audience that I've spoken with. And it's just a quote. I like to just quickly read it to you. So again, humor, one more time. So what is success? To laugh often and much, to win the respect of intelligent people, and the affection of children, to earn the appreciation of honest critics and endure the betrayal of false friends, to appreciate the beauty, to find the best in others, to leave the world a bit better, whether by a healthy child, check, 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 a garden patch, or a redeemed social condition. To know that just one life has breathed easier because you have lived, this is to have succeeded. The reason I love this quote, and it actually was written originally by Bessie Stanley, it was then kind of morphed into something maybe a little bit more poetic, if you will, by Ralph Waldo Emerson. But the truth of it is some of the biggest, brightest companies, their leaders, have this on their refrigerator, or I've tweeted it on social media. And the fact that we're all thinking about that, A, gives me hope, but B, really sets the stage for what Microsoft is trying to do and what many organizations are trying to do, which is maybe a quote that you know, like, with great power, right, comes, right, Emerson, Spider-Man, that's all you need. Like, write that stuff down. No, I'm just kidding. But that's really it, right? That's really it. How can we change the world with our tech? So you will walk out of here with amazing ideas. You may even want to start a company. You may be like, oh my gosh, I could make millions doing this. But then, just for a second, think about how you could change the world. I have seen, like, I almost get teary-eyed watching it. I'm like, oh my gosh, I know so many people whose lives have changed. My son, who I showed a picture of earlier, has Down syndrome, and our lives are just different because AI showed up. Alexa opened my son to communication and talking. He sets his own playlist, stuff that I never thought he would do, because he can communicate the way he wants to. And I'll share more about that in just a sec. So in the last few minutes, I just want to show you some of this power, right? We have more power than ever. How are we going to leverage this? I am an AI for every developer. That's my soapbox/platform. I want everyone who wants to be a developer. Anyone in here want to be a developer? Like, have an inkling? That's okay, I got 7 minutes, so just hang in there. I'm just kidding. You don't have to want to be a developer, but anyone who has a heart for, like, creating something that happens to be in code, it's important to know that it's not like it was even 5 years ago. Today you can build an Alexa skill in 5 minutes with no coding skills whatsoever. The world is ours. And so what I want to do right now is just show you a couple of examples, and hopefully that'll spark some of the ideas that maybe you'll be able to build on or even come up with brand new ones a little bit later on. So we have 2 things I want to show you. One is this concept of computer vision. Anyone know what that term means? Don't worry, I won't ask you to define it. Anyone? No? Computer vision? All right, cool. So computer vision is the ability for a piece of software to look at an image or a video and make sense of it, right? Be able to go, oh, that's a tree and that's a person, and right? Figure out who it is. There's actually a really nice website, and I'll be sure to tweet this out to you guys. But if you just go out to, like, we have a little bit.ly link thing called aka.ms, and if you wanted to write this down, you could. Cognitive, it's kind of tricky to spell sometimes, services. And all this does is it lets you, in the browser with no technical skills at all, test out what these models are capable of. This is called the commoditization of AI. There are very smart people in very big companies creating AI models to do the things that we maybe want to leverage, right? Like, do you want to read an entire document to find the one quote you were looking for? Or would you be okay asking a machine to do that? We actually do it all the time. I ask Alexa for things every single day that I probably could manually look up in a book that I own in my bookshelf, right? So here, I'm just going to give you an example, but if you go down, there's tons of these where you can just demo these in the browser. I'm going to show you what it looks like. But let me go in and just do, like, let's say scene and activity recognition. Right, so I'm going to go in, demo this. It's going to show you an image, and in this image, there's a bunch of tags. This is AI at its finest. Build a piece of software that can look at an image and then define what's in there. Now, I, as a marketer, I, as a content person, can use this data to then grab more stuff, right? I can go get YouTube videos related to this. Right? It empowers me to provide more information to the person looking at this photo. But let's just say, for example, I want to go in and look for a picture. Let's see if I can find one quickly. I have a lot of pictures, I know. Let's see. Oh my goodness. I'm going to go to images. Images, come on. All right. So I did this little fun project called Chip or Dale. Anyone know how to tell the difference between Chip, I'm saying it very carefully, Chip or Dale? Disney characters, keep it clean, people. Disney characters, I know, I run through this all, it's kind of part of the gag. No, I actually had no idea people would be confused when I built this. So I'm gonna just grab an image of Chip and Dale from Disney for the Facebook people out there. And what's gonna happen, let me just scroll up, right? Is it's gonna then analyze that. Now my goal was that it would be like, oh, there's Chip and there's Dale and they're at Disney. Look what it says instead, right? Stuffed bear, brown, okay. Large teddy bear standing next to a sign. Kinda, all right. But I wanna do something more. So here's where AI can help me. How do I, as opposed to having to write all of this code to make this happen, how could I just simply educate this little piece of software by just passing it a couple images? So we have a model called Custom Vision that allows me to go in very easily and load a bunch of images on top of that model. So the model already knows about fuzzy teddy bears, so I don't have to train it about that. I just need to train it about these Chip and Dale pictures. So I go in, right? And now what I do is I tag these images. Again, no code is involved, not even a technical thing. I just go in and I circle the things that I want it to know about. I grab the nose, turns out the difference, a little bit of trivia. Chip has a chocolate chip, black nose, and Dale's the other guy, the red one, brown, red. Turns out AI had a hard time telling who Dale was because his nose was brownish in some pictures, red in others, right? The light changed his nose, but black is black, luckily, right? Turns out their entire face is different, but I focused in on the nose. So I went in, the minimum I needed to train this model, in other words, to make the decision accurate, was 15 images. So I added 15 images, and now when I go in and I say, you know, let me do a quick test, let me browse out to a file, hopefully it'll remember where I was, or I can navigate to it again, right? And I pick one, and what should happen is it should be able to, with a certain level of confidence, identify who's who, right? So I should be able to see, oh, I removed the thing. But I should be able to see pretty easily who is Chip and who is Dale. I'm just gonna do that super fast one more time. It's right here, there we go. Open. Oh, that's even another one, right? So it's literally thinking right then. The model is literally going, does that look like a black nose? It does, 97.3% success. I, as a non-developer, can go in and then check my performance and go, how confident is this model in making good decisions? Anywhere above 80 is good. 100 says you're doing something wrong because no model should be able to determine something 100% of the time. Almost means you'll have false positives. So this is awesome because it allows, imagine if you will, you are a produce organization and you want to detect good or bad produce, right? Now I can just give it pictures of good produce. It already knows what oranges are. I just have to say, here's what bad oranges look like. Send me a message when you see one of those. Or send a message to the person on the floor, or stop the line. We use this with Track Pack. They make applesauce little containers. Obviously, I'm very concerned about this because I have children, and I'm like, I want to make sure that's going well. So how do they know when that's not going well? How do they know when that's failing? It's called anomaly detection, right? How do I figure it out? Computer vision is just one way to do that. The last fun example I'm going to share with you, it's only like maybe 2 minutes, is about a problem every one of us has, which is around your hard drive. If I asked you to find something you put on your hard drive, say 3 years ago, you might struggle to locate it. Anyone understand what I'm saying? Right? So wouldn't it be nice, and it turns out the world's data is stored similarly on hard drives in our biggest companies. Of course, Google has indexed the public stuff, Bing has indexed the public stuff, but what about all the stuff, like Matt said, that companies are storing about us? They don't even know what they have, to be honest. They're like, oh no, we just stick it in the cloud. They said it's cheap, right? They haven't even hired the people that know what to do with it. So this is a technology that allows any web dev to be able to do, and I just want to share it with you super quick. Where's my person? Okay, so this is just a web application. It's actually based on, anyone familiar with the JFK files? Kind of a test generationally, maybe? Got it, okay. So JFK, who was he? Just, it's kind of like for fun, just seeing if you even care enough about me to say something. So thank you for replying. But JFK is like a president in the 60s, got assassinated. Sad story. He had actually someone who succeeded him immediately. Imagine if you're that guy, like, oh, my friend just died and I now have his job. Not a fun place to be. So I thought, wouldn't it be cool if we could create, now what ended up happening is the government shrouded all the docs in conspiracy theory, confidential, what do they call it, classified, code words, and filed it away. 3 years ago, they were like, American people, you've been asking for this. Here it is. Like on a floppy disk or something, right? Like in a completely unknowable format. No metadata, no descriptions, just like here's all the 30,000 docs in a file folder, similar to our hard drive. Like just, bleh. And so we said, thank you. But a couple engineers in our organization said, oh my gosh, this would be so fun. We should create a way to analyze this. So let's say we wanted to find out a little bit about Oswald, right? So this is just souped up AI in motion. First thing that ends up happening is an index. That's not super smart, right? We've been using indexes on Google search for a long time. So it creates an index, and it uses this search term to find it in every doc. How does it find it, though? Now it's going to use computer vision, like I talked to you about, to do OCR, which basically recognizes text in images. These are not things that we could search before, right? These are actual docs, pictures of documents, 1960s pictures of documents, for goodness sakes. So it's able to transcribe that and even highlight the content that we're interested in. It is even able to do that for cursive. And again, this is just as a web service. This is not like you don't have to build this model. It does this automatically. And then it can even use computer vision. Remember the fluffy teddy bear? It says, Lee Harvey Oswald posing for the camera. Not exactly, right? Like, but that's okay. I'm like, it's fine. What could I have done to make it think that this was a mugshot? Based on what you now know. I could add more pictures, right? I'd go out, grab pictures. See, you are AI people. We are done. But there's one little fun part that I want to share with you. So there is the last little piece on this app. This is like an old school app, like a 2015 app, right? Like old. But there are still people who like to use web browsers and stuff. And so you can see here, this gives you a visual representation. Imagine if you're the end user trying to find something in this data. Rather than going, oh my gosh, that's a really long list. Where do I start? I now bubble up the most relevant content in a visual diagram and say, start here. That's improving the ingenuity of the user. How do I make them better? They're not in any way going, darn, I wish you didn't do that. Right? Some of the best CEOs say things like, people will never complain when you make things easier or more convenient for them. So this is, again, AI in action. The last thing I did is I created a cool little chatbot because I'm a voice person. Alexa, come on. So I built a chatbot on top of it, and I thought, who would Lyndon B. Johnson want to talk to if he could talk to anybody? Turns out he'd want to talk to the head of the FBI at the time. His name is Mr. J. Edgar Hoover. He was not a nice man, but I decided to make him nice. So, because I can do that. But more importantly, I created a chatbot. So let's see what he has to say. I'm going to use speech for this.
Welcome to the JFK Files. I'm J. Edgar Hoover.
Did any of you notice that he might have had a tiny bit of an accent? I created this voice from uploaded audio from 1960s little pieces of content that I found in the JFK Files and YouTube videos that scraped content from that as well. Uploaded an hour of content, got that voice. I tell you, as soon as I heard that accent, I was like, I am done. This is fantastic. I'm not an acoustic person, but I could have made that sound even better, right, if I spent more than an hour on it. But how cool is it that I can now go back in time? I mean, I always think about it. Wouldn't it be great if I could hear my grandma explain to me, who's now passed, explain to me how she got married to my grandpa and how they had my dad, right? Like, that'd be so awesome. So let's just finally take a look at what happens when somebody actually does a search. I'm going to try and use Farfield, which means I'm going to talk to the browser. Mr. Hoover, what is GP floor?
Lee Harvey Oswald, post-assassination designation. It is usually used as a slug to describe the contents of a memo as Oswald related.
Wait for it. I'm on phone Wi-Fi.
Also, I found some documents you may be interested in.
So now what has just happened is, as a result of me building a bot, I've now made it so someone can talk to their browser, execute a search, it'll bubble up the most relevant, I can now click on it and go deeper. People, again, another thing they don't say is like, ooh, let me super easily interact with your software. And voice is one of those mechanisms, and if you use voice today in any capacity, that is AI. But I do ask you to remember there are developers behind that, so be nice to them. But that's it. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed it. Oh, yeah.
Thank you, Noelle, for that. Again, we wanted to give you a sense that AI is here already. You saw the word cloud that Molly had put out earlier about future. The future is here. I wanted to ask you two quick questions, Noelle, and if anybody has a burning question, by the way, Noelle will be here throughout the day, and she is available to you to talk to you about this. When we're doing some of the activities, you can use her as a consultant and as an expert
And
on
I have
this.
tons of demos if you want to come play. Anyway.
So, how would you define artificial intelligence for the purposes of what we want to accomplish today?
So I define artificial intelligence in two ways. Basically, what I mentioned earlier, weak AI, which is the ability for us to improve the ingenuity of our users, which we can actually do without a model, right? That's why AI is different than machine learning, because there are lots of ways to create artificial intelligence that looks magical to our user that is not a model that we have built. The other side, though, is strong AI. I don't know if I want to use that term anymore, but the AI that requires you actually building a machine learning algorithm, making decisions about complexity of, like, let's say you're in healthcare, you don't want an 80% success rate on confidently guessing someone's diagnosis. You're going to want closer to like 99.9, right? You don't want to accidentally misdiagnose somebody with AI. So that is a much more deeper side of AI, and that's, I think, what we're going to focus a little, at least I hope, a little bit on today.
So you showed us some examples. It seems very accessible, and I think a lot of us would be surprised to know that we're this far along. In the grand scheme of things, how far along are we? I mean, are we in the late innings of this game, or is this really still the beginning of AI?
Oh, that's a good question. So we really are still in the beginning of AI. However, we are way further along in democratizing that content as ever before. Can you put the slide thing back up really quick? These are all of the pre-built models that exist today. These are things you can do with a web service any web developer has access to. Everything from speech to text analytics to video indexing. One of the biggest one is content moderation. Being able to protect people from bad content and being able to set bars for what that means. Like, what did they say? Like risque versus like mature. Well, who draws that line? So it gives us tools for making that easier.
Great. Well, because we are a bit over time right now, I thought we'd give you an opportunity to speak to Noelle on a one-on-one basis a little bit later and ask her any questions. And thank you very much, Noelle, for sharing that great perspective. Thanks. Noelle LaCharite. So as part of this first section on literacy around AI, you've heard Noelle from the developer point of view in terms of what the tools are. Now we're going to hear from Vinay Narayan, who is the VP of Product and Operations at HTC VIVE. We met Vinay last year, and actually one of the reasons why we're doing this event now is because we had a series of salons for our students where we brought some really amazing thought leaders from our community to start to ask the question, what do we need to know about what's coming next so we can adjust our curriculum accordingly and we can engage the public. And Vinay was our expert on AI, and we talked a bit about blockchain as well. And so he's extremely smart, he's very accessible in thinking about these things. And I believe that he actually represents what we're trying to create, this next generation of leaders who get the technology, can make sense of it to the public, but also can manage the people who are actually creating the technology so they do it responsibly and they do it well. And they do it according to our needs. And so Vinay is really good at understanding that. And he's going to give us a sense of what it means to, what is AI and debunking some of the myths around that. As a side note, Ross Reynolds from KUOW, who's also one of our students, is here today. And we're doing a big debate about whether technology will save us for Seattle Town Hall and KUOW in March. And I decided to take the opposing view that no, technology is not going to save us. And then he asked, well, who else do you want to debate? And I mentioned Vinay, and sadly Vinay said yes. And I'm debating against Vinay, and as you're going to find out, I'm going to lose. So Vinay Narayan from HTC.
Hey guys, how's it going? Awesome. Well, I'm actually really excited to talk to you guys today about what I like to call it is not so artificial intelligence. And the reason why I say that is because there's a lot of myths or kind of misconceptions around what AI really is. And really the short of it is AI is really built by us, not just engineers, but really decision makers that really have a wide variety of values, viewpoints, and just kind of understandings. And it's just how do we kind of really pull that together? And why that's so important to me is I think in terms of kind of what I do in general, I've had a great opportunity in the last almost 20 years to work with almost 6 different industries. But there's one thing that's been very common in these industries is what problem am I trying to solve? And who am I solving this problem for? And I think when you start to look at technology from that lens, then you realize that technology is just a tool. And I think it's a very important thing to understand because when we're trying to solve or build complex things, we don't just use one tool, and we may not use a tool at a certain point. So really understanding how those pieces fit together is really fundamental, and I think it's also very fundamental for AI. So maybe too soon, but I know that with kind of Facebook's 10-year challenge, there's been a lot of questions around, well, why is Facebook really doing this? And I feel like whatever Facebook does, there's always some sort of negative connotation. But I hope by the end of this, when you look at the Facebook challenge, maybe your opinions will be slightly more informed than just assuming that Facebook's going to use your pictures from 10 years ago to understand facial recognition. And also, hopefully by the end of this, you also have a point of view around what AI will allow you to do. AI can allow you to do a host of things, but most importantly, what it means to you in particular and how to really be able to do that. So really connecting the gaps, it's much more than just really having the understanding of the technology. It's the customer first. As leaders and just people with an opinion in your respective areas, those that are closest to the problem, those that are closest to the customers, you're the experts. Your team consists of engineers. Your team consists of a lot of other thought leaders that help you to kind of piece those gaps. But really, your customer perspective is first. The technology is a piece of that. And also kind of your business goals, your values, and your experience all come together to really create that solution. And oftentimes when we're trying to really get that solution, some of the things we try to look at is making sure that we're not talking past each other or just maybe having a misunderstanding of what we're actually talking about, or as the case with little Marco. So Marco's friend and him are actually having a conversation about the same thing, they think, which is your address, but the street name obviously got misconstrued. But while that's a funny example, it actually happens all the time in technology and the things that we talk about. So having a common literacy or common definition is important. So that's kind of why I like to start with definitions a lot. And to really get all of us on the same page is what is it we're really talking about? When I look at AI, I look at it as 2 kind of different categories. Not me per se, but I think just in general in the industry. You have symbolic learning, and then you have machine learning. Some of the examples we've seen earlier with Noelle is also a combination of both. The way to look at symbolic learning is maybe a series of if-then statements. And when you start to look and understand that, that's a very kind of literal understanding of kind of what AI is, and also the earlier forms of AI. So as a computer, if you have enough information, enough if-then statements, you can make a very definitive answer. But that's not really intelligence, right? That's kind of when you're younger, you kind of talk about don't do this, and you're like, why? Well, just don't do it, right? Make your bed because you're supposed to. And over time, you realize, well, those are good habits because it lead to other decisions, and that's really what machine learning is about. Machine learning is more algorithmic rules, but what you get from those rules is correlations. So other understandings. So not just the literal of here's the specific thing, therefore it's this, but what else am I not seeing or understanding? And those technologies are really kind of built upon other areas. So computer vision, for example, is there's a form of symbolic learning that you can use computer vision for. Image processing and robotics. There are a lot of things you think robotics are really sentient beings, but really they're following a series of if-then statements, right? At least some form. Of course, there's machine learning versions of that as well. And then you kind of have kind of an overlap with pattern recognition. And machine learning is really what I think makes AI extremely exciting, because then you start to add additional models like statistical learning, deep learning. And if you kind of notice, there's some overlaps there with computer vision. There's computer vision that's very straightforward and linear, like symbolic learning. And then there's more advanced computer vision that falls within the machine learning category. And then, of course, you have neural networks and other things that all kind of get pieced together. So the point of that is AI is not one thing, it's a series of things, and they're all very many different components. You don't need to really know them all to make a decision around it, just know that they exist. So why AI now? AI is such a big part of the conversation right now because it's definitely gone from theory, but now we're in the era of implementation. That means it's going to work its way into our everyday lives, but more importantly, you are going to make choices about how to implement it, when to implement it, and why to do so, and the different flavors of AI that actually exist. So we will shape the future of AI, and I think that's important. And that we, I really mean it's the collective we. It's not just one group, and I feel like engineers get a really bad name for that. But if you look at how deep that technology stack has to go, it does take really dedicated developers and engineers to do that really allow the super simple interfaces that allow us to make those decisions. So where are we right now? I think we're still really early. We're right in the middle of between weak AI and strong AI. On the bottom there, those are kind of the 7 principles of artificial intelligence or AI that was kind of developed in 1955. So this concept's been around for a long time. AI is also not a checkbox. Just because you've done one thing, it doesn't mean you've done it well. And that's really where this journey and the continuing improvements of that actually ends up happening. And how do you improve that? It's a combination between our inputs, our values, and the reasons why we want to do something to make it better. So AI chatbots gets a lot of bad press, but really what is it? Chatbots are just a great tool in general that really help to kind of funnel conversations. Using technologies like speech recognition, pattern recognition, and recommended course of action, it really comes from those. So in this particular example, there are actually some really great AI-driven chatbots that you can use for kind of medical purposes and questions. And what's been interesting about chatbots in general is that we found that about 44% of people are more likely to be more honest with a chatbot than with a person. And that's profound. Actually, that stat's like 2 years old. And that's pretty profound because if you're going to be asking medical-related questions, I kind of want to, ask the real questions, right? If you've ever been to a doctor's appointment with your elderly parents, you realize they're not going to talk about a lot of things because there's a level of futility that happens when you really talk about your challenges. But with a chatbot, you can do that. So that's super critical. And so what does that really mean? So chatbots does not mean you're going to actually reduce your customer care teams. I know this. I run a customer care team. It makes them more effective. Why so? There's a lot of these basic questions that we do. And Noelle made a good point. There's so many aspects about our job we'd rather be doing. So asking about billing questions may not be the best part of your day, especially as a customer care organization, because ultimately you want to care about that team. So then you can go deeper into those customer issues. And a majority of people actually prefer to talk to a chatbot than a person. Why? Because chatbots are also effective when they're used well, because it gets you to the point much sooner than a person. So I'm going to really quickly go through lab analysis. Lab analysis does use computer vision as well, moving away from chatbots, but really the purpose and the benefit of this. So Stanford, for example, has implemented computer vision in their labs. They're able to go through 130,000 images and index over 2,000 diseases, which currently, before AI, or at least in implementation of AI, was done actually manually. Literally, very smart people looking at slides to make correlations between diseases. And when you're in a time crunch or have a disease outbreaks, that time is super critical. So what about AI for everyday problems? One of the things that we kind of encounter quite a bit, and this is actually an example you can actually look up online as well, is trying to find parking. It can be a really irritating thing to find parking, but what if I can use AI to help me find parking, even let me know via text that a parking space is available? Well, that exists. So the common thing that we end up getting when we're trying to understand AI in general is the questions we ask. So what problem am I really trying to solve? And while that might seem like a very fundamental and easy to answer question, that question and how we define it changes with the technology we're trying to implement. If you have a core understanding of how the technology works, then you can ask the right questions for those that are helping you to build that solution. So that way you don't pull a little Marco and ask the wrong questions. So if you're trying to figure out how can I use computer vision, which we Noelle did a great example of Chip and Dale, of our kind of nose descriptions, but that it also implies I know a lot about those areas and how to use computer vision. So in this particular example, the developer actually said, well, really, at the end of the day, because I know how computer vision works, I know the tools, I'm going to ask the question of the problem I'm trying to solve is valid parking spaces are just places containing non-moving cars. wasn't going to be your first reaction, but if you know how the technology works, it makes sense. And the reason why that makes so much sense is because then you were actually kind of funneling the right things to solve for. So before, doing this was actually super difficult, right? The ability to kind of detect cars and then train AI to actually figure that out. Well, the nice thing is there are large data sets, one of it called COCO, which is a common objects in context, that actually indexes everything about certain objects. In this particular database, there's over 13,000 pictures of just vehicles. So it knows a vehicle. So rather than me trying to go and upload that large data set for level of accuracy, so of course, when it comes to cars, things like that, we want it to be highly accurate, and data is super key, but I don't have to do that. It exists. And it's actually open source, it's free, and that's actually really important. So now I can go and upload this data set, train my machine learning algorithm to actually figure that out, or I could just upload that pre-existing model. And that also exists as well. So the ability to create this solution, to take a webcam, and to identify parking spots can actually be done in an afternoon with very little development experience. That's great, but I'm not an engineer. And I think that's my point. You don't have to be an engineer. You should not be an engineer. Dynamic teams have a combination of very many various folks. You're solving the problem because you're closest to the problem. You know what's best for the customer and what's best for the people that are impacting that. But there's also, I always feel like there's great opportunities to learn that technology. TensorFlow is a great example of that in TensorFlow.js, which is actually a web interface that you need zero coding experience to do at all. You can actually even create, like this person actually did, create a Pac-Man game all in the web browser with knowing very little about development. And also Keras is also a set of APIs that's geared towards non-developers that makes understanding AI very simple. I always like to share these types of information because I'm not an engineer, but I work with tons of engineering teams. I actually develop a lot of products that are extremely complex. So knowing enough about technologies that I interface with has always been important. So I always try to always understand why I'm trying to do something and how this technology works, maybe even if it's on the surface. Whenever you're trying to figure out how to use technology and you think you're not technical enough, I like to use the photographer's example quite a bit. A lot of folks may think photographers, and if there's any photographers here, that are not very technical. But the moment you ask a photographer about light diffraction, aperture, everything from patterns, and just such very many different qualities, mechanical versus digital, they can talk your ear off. Because when you're passionate about something, you'll know your tool. And when it comes to AI, we're all passionate about the problems we're trying to solve for, but we're trying to figure out how can we learn more and what tools are out there. And I just want you to know the tools are out there, and they can be at a level that makes a lot of sense, and you also have the ability to impact that. So when we look at that 10-year challenge again, I hope you realize that Facebook doesn't have to trick you into posting a picture of you 10 years ago to understand how you age over time, and just any company for that matter. So the 10-year challenge can be just that. Maybe it's just fun, and we can actually enjoy it and not always look at how they actually look. So actually, I'm going to go back one slide because I think this one is also important. One last kind of thing to note is AI is not going to take away jobs. No, technologies don't. They really evolve how work is actually done. And if you look at the industries that are going to grow the most, according to Accenture, by 2035, the industries impacted the most are not technology companies, right? And in fact, those companies will grow because of AI and the implementations of AI. And so hopefully you have at least more of a point of view of what AI will allow you to do. And with that, just want to say thank you.
Thanks, Vinay. I think we have time to take a couple questions. We're going to be moving into some interaction in a second, but I wanted to ask you a fundamental question. You were really great in showing examples of how the tools are out there now, and people can start thinking about this. But how do you discover this? If I'm a manager of an organization and I have a challenge that I think, oh, I've heard about this AI thing, I'd like to figure out how to use it. Where do I start looking to find some of these tools?
Yeah, I think, it's funny. While I think Google searches are always good, they actually kind of work. Noelle did a great job of it. I think when it comes to some of the stuff that Microsoft's kind of working on, there's just, when technology is new, the community is very open. So that like events like these they're just great, right? And there's so many AI-based community events that actually happen everywhere where you can go and you can ask these very basic questions and actually get people that you can actually work with to actually help you answer those questions. But there's a lot of resources actually that are available if you just even start to ask. and doing your own research as well. There's tons of great YouTube assets that you can go, because when you start to get the fundamental baseline understanding, your questions start to get a little more focused, and then I think those answers that kind of come up are a lot more actionable.
Okay, so if I'm a hotel manager and I have a parking situation, can I easily find a solution for
Oh, for
this?
sure,
Yeah.
for sure. And I think a lot of your web browsers are also based around that. And the more you search about AI, the more relevant your search results get around that as well. Or you can just show up to one of the mini community events that happen multiple times a week in pretty much every metro around AI.
So we're very much in the discoverability phase in terms of, well, if you actually think you should be starting to apply these solutions, it is going to require a bit of, it sounds like a bit of shoe leather from you to go out and find those, but we're getting there. Does anybody have any questions? Oh, we have questions here. We have a lot of questions. Mal, do we have a roving mic, or should I come down and do this? Let me just do this here. Who's the first question?
You said technology will not take away jobs. How does technology, if it's perfected in the self-driving cars and trucks, not take away jobs?
I think it evolves those jobs, right? So I think HVAC is a great example of that. So HVAC, heating, ventilating, air conditioning, as jobs evolve, like one of the biggest users of actually AR and VR, because there's a shortage of being able to train people quickly enough. So when you look at things like transportation or transportation professionals, I ask myself, why do many folks actually want to even drive Uber? Is it because they want to be a driver? It is that source of income. So what AI may reduce the number of Uber drivers or drivers in general, but it also then improves the ability for you to learn new skill sets to do the jobs you really, truly want to do. And it's not just in isolation. It actually positively impacts many other areas there as well.
I think that's a good answer. It's a very good question. I think some of the challenges that we've seen in terms of critical reports around the transition is that, yes, AI will free up the opportunity to learn new skills and do different things that may have been tedious historically. The problem, I think the challenge is that this stuff is coming so fast that the transition time is also decreasing. And this is what's causing a lot of anxiety. Will my job disappear too quickly for me to be able to adjust and be able to make that transition economically? And that's why there's been some talk about we've got to reform our labor system and our educational system to prepare for this. The challenge is that it's happening too fast. And that's where the anxiety is. And I think that's what sort of adds some nuance to this. Sure. Other questions? I thought I saw a couple of hands. Over here. I hold the mic.
Oh, hi. I'd love to hear what is your feeling about the privacy practices around all this, and the fact that this is a bigger question, which we may address today, about the Chinese government and the walls that they have and the access as American companies that we don't have to their market, but they are gaining to ours just simply by purchasing and engaging in buying a lot of businesses in our economy.
And before you answer that, it's worth mentioning that this, I think it was last weekend, 60 Minutes, the CBS News magazine, had a really interesting story, which is online, about AI. And they had a really strong focus on China and how it's almost like the next Sputnik moment of the arms race between China and the United States. HTC, which Vinay works for, is a Taiwanese-based company, and they have obviously a perspective on that as well.
Yeah, I think, unfortunately, there's not enough time to properly answer that question, but it's an important question. In general, when it comes to data and privacy in general, a lot of the stuff that we're looking at, it's anonymized, right? So it's not always correlated. That question is not just a technology question, but it's also a policy question, right? So I think how we're structuring these databases, hopefully if you've learned anything, that it's not automatic, it's not magical. Even nodes, for example, are very physically created by people, that we can create those policies and understandings that those impact. And I think if we focus on the wrong things or approach privacy, for example, the wrong way, like, for example, just kind of blame some of the big tech companies, not realizing it doesn't take a big company to develop these skill sets. We have to have more of a holistic answer to that. The other side to it as well is, I bet that you'd be willing to pay for services that actually have your data private. And when that starts to happen and take off more companies would actually adopt that model because it's an additional revenue stream.
And you'll be hearing another perspective on this soon from our next speaker, Schachter, who's going to be talking a bit about policy and data. It's a really important question. You heard Noelle mention this as well, that it's not, I don't necessarily think in all my conversations with tech leaders that there's much deviousness going on right now. In conversations with folks from Google and other companies that are sitting on a ton load of data, nobody really knows what they've got. You know, you've heard that they haven't even hired the people to start going through this, and they might have to develop an AI. So there is a ton load of data out there, and it's just getting bigger and bigger. And yes, there is a privacy element to it, but they haven't been able to figure out exactly what to do with it yet. And that's why I say we're in this moment, because we have to shape those decisions before it's too late for us. Because that, even though if AI is still very early, the data is being accumulated, especially in surveillance states like China, where they continue to perfect this. And we must, at least in an open society like ours, have the opportunity to shape that before it's too late. Molly, should I take one more question, or should we move on? Okay, I'll take one more question. I think Joel, did you have your hand up? Okay, you okay? Okay, anybody else? Yes.
And this will probably be a theme throughout the day, but I'm just curious if you're comfortable with or your thoughts on the level of vetting of the training sets and you know, if there's enough review going on to figure out, you know, what were the inputs and do they need to be reevaluated and recalibrated to, you know, reflect the kind of world we want to live in rather than just the current state, which may be inequitable in a lot of circumstances.
Yeah, I think in general, I think that when it comes to the data sets, knowing how good it is, there's always area for improvement. There's a lot of fantastic data sets in general. However, I think that's kind of where we're at right now, is that now we know to ask those questions, right? And I think when it comes to certain areas of data sets, for example, knowing cars is pretty important, but those like in the cancer cell detection area, if we ask the right questions to the right engineers, they can also help us to give us tools to validate how close we are to that. But also, AI doesn't make the decisions for you. I think let's need to understand that. It gets us to a point to make decisions faster, right? And if you realize that and have the right tools and processes in place, then you can kind of really balance out the power of this technology with the decisions that we need to make.
I think Vinay has AI in his glasses, because I can't imagine how he saw your name tag that you're from the Fred Hutch Cancer Center, and he was able to talk to cancer cells. That's great. This has been really helpful in really understanding this, because it's going to transition very nicely into the conversation we're going to encourage you to have at your tables, understanding that we're still at a very sort of nascent level of knowledge around this. But Vinay, where are you going to be for the next 20 minutes after you're done your presentation?
Hang out in the back over there.
You're going to probably want to search him out. And Noelle, where is Noelle right now? Oh, Noelle's over there.
Yeah.
So you get a chance. I'm going to pass over to Molly in a second to explain what we're doing next. But you should consider Vinay and Noelle as your consultants or experts if you have any questions about what we're going to do next. So with that, Molly.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Vinay.
Okay, hi again. So first, we are running about 15 minutes behind, so that means we're gonna have lunch about 15 minutes later than we said. When I attend an event, I always like to know that, so I'm not like squirming, hungry to eat. So we are running behind, we're gonna make up for it. We'll definitely feed you, we have plenty of time, plenty of food and all that. But at your tables right now, there should be about 3 or 4 sheets with an explanation of an activity that we just handed out to you. And what this activity looks at is the idea that the airport is congested. And the question that we want to pose today is, can AI help? So I'm going to give you a couple minutes to just read through that activity at your table, and then I'll explain what we'll kind of go over what we'll do from there.